Hi Tim, hi everyone. Uh, this is Wendy, as I've already said, from Perth, Western Australia, and I'm just here to introduce Tim. I actually had the privilege of meeting Tim in Perth when he worked here for Moodle, and that's why I think he says Perth beats it. Um, Tim, I knew when he worked. It was a privilege to meet you, and I remember meeting Tim at the Moodle headquarters when I came in visiting, because I work for Pukunui and now they're in separate buildings, but they're now in the same building. And meeting him and having a good chat and discovering quite quickly what a brilliant musician he also was. And now, obviously, Tim works at the Open University in Milton Keynes as well. Is that right?
Yep, the Open University headquarters in Milton Keynes.
That's right. That's right, and obviously, as everybody knows, he's a developer still with Moodle and is still very involved with Moodle headquarters. And that's it. Over to you, Tim.
Right, thank you, Wendy. Thank you, everyone, for coming to listen to this. This presentation is basically one I was asked to give at the German Moodle Moot earlier this year. Which was in Leipzig, which is a very beautiful place. Naturally, I'm in the Moodle world. I'm mainly responsible for the quiz module, but I was going there to talk about the quiz, but having agreed to go there and talk about the quiz, and then they agreed to pay for me to travel there, and then they said, "Oh, our server technicians would really like to hear you talk about how the Open University hosts Moodle." And since they just agreed to fly me there and put me up for a week, it was difficult to say no. And I didn't really want to say no, because as I started to, I knew a lot of this stuff already, but when it came to preparing a presentation, it really helped me kind of understand what it is we do at the Open University, so it was really quite useful. And I hope you find it useful. It's a sort of fairly informal talk, and certainly at Leipzig there were lots of questions, and I learnt a lot from ideas other people had as well as what we do, because what we do is always a work in progress. Your Moodle site's running okay today, but you always know there are several things you want to investigate that might make it work better when you get the chance to try them. So the way this talk is going to work, I'm going to start by saying a little bit about the Open University and how we use Moodle, just to set the scenes. And then we're going to get into the meat of the presentation. We're going to start with the hardware level, and then think about the code, and then think about the Moodle configuration. And if you were expecting anything about the pedagogy here, then I'm afraid that would be a different talk. We're really just thinking about the technical side of things here. Okay, so, well, here I leap straight into how we use Moodle, but perhaps I should say a little bit about the Open University itself first. As Wendy just says, it's based in Milton Keynes, which is a town in the centre of the UK, but it doesn't really matter where the headquarters are, because the Open University is entirely distance education. So we have about 200,000 students all around the UK, and indeed some all around the world. They study part-time. Most of our modules run for either a year or half a year of part-time study, and they start at different times of year, normally I think February or October, but it does mean there's never a time when the system is not in use. A lot of a traditional school or university will have a long summer holiday, which is a good time to do maintenance on the Moodle site. We don't have that. At any time of year, there are students online, even on Christmas Day. Not that we'd want to upgrade Moodle on Christmas Day. So, and over the years, we've ended up with not just one Moodle site. We have one main Moodle site, our main VLE, where each of our modules, what Moodle calls a course, the OU now calls modules, which is terribly confusing because Moodle has modules. But we have a main VLE where there's a website for each module, and that's the one that gets the most use. We also have, and also we don't tend to call them courses or whatever, we just refer to them as websites, which I think is quite a good thing. There's a good presentation from the University of Sussex at the UK Moodle Moot, where they said, well, to the student, it's just a website, and Moodle helps you build it. We have another site where there's a website for each qualification the student might be studying towards. We have another website which just has openly available resources, like the kind of how not to cheat website. Sorry, it's called Developing Good Academic Practice. And also the kind of the study skills material is on Learn One. That's available to everyone. We have a copy of Moodle where there's training materials for staff. Then we have the more fun ones. We've got the Open Science Laboratory, which is a joint project between the Open University and the Wolfson Foundation to experiment with the idea of putting scientific experiments online, which is, it's an open question whether you can actually do that, but we're trying as a research project, and that site is bits of that site are open to the public if you want to go and try it. I put a link in the iMoot course for this presentation. There's a link there. And there's Open Learn, which has been around for quite a lot of years now, where all our open courseware goes. And if you come to my other presentation, you'll hear about how the Open University is using Moodle as part of our way of doing online exams. Chris asked, do we have continual enrolments? No, we don't. Courses are presented at a particular time, normally either once or twice a year. So students have to start at that start time, and then a whole cohort of students will be studying the course module at the same time and same rate, which helps if you have discussion activities. Sorry, Christine. The first time it gave your name, it just cut it off after Chris. Okay. So I just thought, sort of rather theoretical, but I'll show you what our VLE looks like. This is our theme. The bar across the top with the sort of student's name and some key links appears on every OU website. And then in the middle you have Moodle. We've done quite a nice theme, I think, but it's a bit out of date. It's not responsive. We're currently, well, all us geeks would like to rebuild the theme now as a responsive theme, and it sounds like we're going to get to do that in the next year or two. A lot of custom blocks down the side, and we have a custom course format that's a bit rather like the weekly format, but it does some nice things. It highlights the current week, and when you're in the middle of a long course, it just shows you the current week and the previous week and the next week. And I was going to point out something else. Oh yes, the other thing to say about our course format, you'll see here we've sort of combined weeks 1 and 2 into a single thing, and weeks 3 and 4, because it turns out that a week is not always a week. We sometimes just miss out weeks, like if it's over Christmas, there'll be a week in the calendar that doesn't exist in the course, and so on. So the strict, what the rest of the world calls weeks is not necessarily the same as what an OU module will call a week. But anyway, so we have a nice course for that. We haven't quite decided when we will move to a bootstrap theme, but obviously the direction Moodle is going in Moodle 2.7 is one of the reasons we want to move. The course format is not shared, I think, because it's it's got some rather OU specific bits. For example, at the bottom there's the little blue of the top week of week 1 and 2. You can see the blue bars, which it's, well, one is sort of showing calendar events, but it's showing calendar events from Moodle plus some events from another OU system, and similarly the tutorials thing is tied into another OU system. So we ought to be able to share most of it, but it would be a mess, and we just haven't had time. And anyway, as part of if we change to a new responsive theme, we would probably change the course format as well. But yeah, there are some nice ideas. The alternative would be for Moodle HQ to steal some of the concepts and add them to standard weekly format, but that may not happen. Anyway, that's what it looks like. So, sort of responsibility for Moodle is lots of people at the OU contribute to making it happen. The key team is the one I'm in, the sort of development and hosting development team in IT. There are about 25 of us, about 16 or so developers, 2 testers, 3 or 4 project managers. Does that add up? I don't know. But quite, yeah, moderately big team. Then sort of at the sort of lower level, you have host systems who run all the OU servers, and the OU, the VLE has a fair number of servers, so we work with them a lot. They do a good job. And then sort of heading in the other direction, away from the technical and towards the teaching, there is another department, Learning and Teaching Solutions, who provides support to all the academics. There's a Moodle administration team there and sort of project management team there who is responsible for consulting with all of the rest of the university to find out what they want from Moodle. Basically, they go and talk to everybody and work out what the university wants, then they tell us what to do. But it's not just a kind of one-way relationship. We have very good discussions with them because you have people like me and Sam Marshall with very strong opinions who've been working on Moodle for a long time. So we know what's technically possible, they know what's educationally desirable, and we have some really good conversations about how what we should do and how we should do it. So that's nice. And then also in Learning and LTS, there's a big sort of, another about dozen people helping with administering Moodle, helping the academic staff create courses and populate them and configure them and ensuring that all the students and stuff are loaded in automatically, but you have to make sure that's set up correctly. And then you get to the staff in the faculties who are responsible for how the course is taught, for creating the course materials. So they're actually building the pedagogic content of the Moodle sites. And then when the courses are delivered to students, course will have lots of students, but they'll be divided into groups with typically about 16 students with one tutor, probably called associate lecturer, who will guide them through the course and grade their work. And then, of course, you have students. Sitting in IT, we very rarely actually get to meet a student, which is sad, but we know that that's why we're doing what we do, really. So the OU employs about 3,000 full-time staff and about 6,000 part-time tutors. So, we are very lucky there. Obviously, as a distance university, Moodle is kind of the key system for teaching our students, and so we get, it's essential we do what we do works, and so we get pretty good resources to do it. And and not just the kind of financial and staff resources. Also, there are lots of academics at the Open University interested in researching how educational technology works. So there are these sort of constant stream of ideas that things people want to try. So that's all the positive. It's a really great place to be doing educational technology in Moodle. The downside is it's this huge institution. The year I had working in Perth, Australia, where you were at a company of 16 people and things just got decided quickly, and then you did it. It was, a place with 3,000 people getting decisions made is much slower, and that's the sort of downside. But on balance, it's a very nice place to be. here on the main VLE, this is the kind of typical load we have. At any time, there are probably about 450 Moodle course websites open. There are probably about 150,000 students enrolled on them. Crazily, over the years, we've got to a situation where we have 50 roles in Moodle. Obviously, there are quite a lot of them that are only used for a few, for a few people in a few situations. There are probably about half a dozen or a dozen roles that are used most of the time. But at one point we thought, surely we don't need all these roles. We should go through and rationalise them. And we went through and understood what each of the roles was and why it exists. And we discovered we needed them all. And my colleague Sharon Money is responsible for keeping on top of those. It's Sharon and then Laura. With every release, there are always a few new capabilities, and they have to decide for each of the 50 roles what is the correct setting for these capabilities. So lucky them. I really want Sharon to give a Moodle presentation. I'm sure she will one day, but she is very, very busy, of course. But she'd give a really good Moot presentation next year. But I mean, the other side again, Moodle's roles is very complicated, but they are really, really flexible, and we need that level of control. Well, also Sharon is the kind of project and requirements manager for the communication and collaboration tools. So she's had a lot of input to our add-ons like Forum NG and OU Wiki and OU Blog. So that's a real job, kind of doing the role as a side issue. Anyway, every day our system probably deals with about 1.25 million page views. Well, this isn't every day. I did pick out a slightly busy day for to get big stats, but actually it was a fairly typical day, just one of the busier typical days. Probably 50,000 different students will log in every day, and they will make about 20,000 forum posts and about 2,000 quiz attempts. It's pretty crazy. So in total, in our database, we have about 700,000 quiz attempts and 6.5 million forum posts. Amazed when I look those numbers up. So that's roughly the kind of thing we're delivering. Now let's look at how we do that. This is a diagram I stole from our host systems team. You aren't really meant to be able to read it, but this is the server setup. Students come in at the top. We have a hardware load balancer, a net scaler, which distributes load between all the different web servers. And we have 6 web servers at the moment. We're not sure we need 6. We might be able to get away with fewer, but when we were specifying this, we decided better safe than sorry, and better to give people a nice, responsive, quick Moodle site. So 6 was the number we chose. Then we have 2 separate servers. As is common to a lot of people, we have a separate server running cron. So just doing background scheduled tasks. It turns out to be quite a good idea to do that on another server, because partly it's how you can set things up. The web servers, typical Moodle page view, student comes in, they want to see a page, you're going to send back that page in about half a second. On the cron server, what you're going to do is you've got this big batch task that's got to send out all the emails to forum subscribers. That task is going to run for like minutes or longer. So you basically want to set up your server a bit differently to handle that, and also it's better, so it's different workload, so it's better to put that on a different server. And then similarly, in the Moodle user interface, there are some pages like reports or backup and restore that take a very long time. And again, we worked out it was better to have a separate server to just handle things like backup and restore and reports, because it's against different workloads, so you want to tweak your server differently. And the way we do that is the load balancer recognizes those requests and sends them over to the other server. So that's the sort of web server application layer. Then we have a database. It doesn't really matter which one I point to because the text is unreadable, but we use Postgres as the database. We have, ever since we started hosting Moodle back in 2005, at the time, the biggest Moodle site in the world was the Open Polytechnic of New Zealand, which was being run by Catalyst IT. They had about 30 or 40,000 users at the time. So, talking to Martin DeGarmus when we were getting started, he said, talk to Catalyst about how to host it, and they said use Postgres, so we did. And 8 years later, we still use Postgres because it's just really, really reliable and scales really well to the number of users we've got. On other systems, using other databases, we've been involved with database corruption, and it's a pain. Postgres has never corrupted any of our data, despite the high load over the years. We have an NFS cluster for handling Moodle data. All the stuff is stored on the back end on a SAN. And we also have a big cluster of memcache machines for caching. So how many servers is that? 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 servers, which is sort of quite a lot. But on the other hand, I know some of the other systems at the OU have even more. So it's kind of not completely ridiculous. All the back-end things like the database, where it's difficult to do clustering, we just have master-slave replication. So at the OU, we've got 2 separate computer rooms, and everything. You have some of the system in one computer room and other bits of the system in the other computer room. So if the power goes out in one place, the other one could keep things running for a bit. What next? So all that hardware is for the live use with students. In order to do our development and testing, we have some other servers where we can put copies of the system for testing. So we have acceptance test where we put the code that's going to be released next to be tested. And in fact, we have 2 sets of servers like that, just because of the different versions of code you need to manage. And we have another set of servers to do load testing on. Because when you're doing load or performance testing of your system, it's quite important that you don't have other things, other traffic there. If you have other things doing things at the same time as your load test, it can distort the results. So we have all those, and we'd still, that's a whole lot more. That's for our main VLE, sort of multiple copies. For most of our other systems, we just have 2 copies. That's enough. Teresa was asking if you have latency issues between the 2 server rooms. No, I can't say that's ever come up as a problem. They're on opposite sides of campus, but that's probably only a few hundred meters apart, and they probably have 10 gigabit Ethernet between them. Yeah, I really don't know because it's never been a problem. Oh yeah, Nadav. Actually, we do that. The separate memcache servers we use for sessions, the memcache servers for things like language strings we have. I'll come to caching later. We do both. Yep, so I was talking about load testing, and actually I haven't talked about releases yet, but we're working towards a release at the start of June, and a few weeks ago I did the load testing, and I wrote a blog about it. But we simulate our load using JMeter, which is quite a common load testing tool. What we do is we look at the stats from the live system and see which pages are being requested the most, and it always comes out that it's basically the course page, resources, so things like files and pages, viewing a forum and posting to a forum, and attempting a quiz. So we have a sort of Moodle report that goes through a course and generates the JMeter script for you for a student attempting doing all those actions in the rough. Sorry, excuse me. In the sort of proportions that we see in our stats for the load on the real system. It turns out that script, it's quite good. It mostly generates the JMeter script you need, and then you have to finish tweaking it by hand. And then to generate the kind of load we need, which is probably around 30 requests a second, we have a sort of 6 virtual machines on the network that we use to generate the load. Anyway, so we try and do that every release, but it's when we're doing a major upgrade, like this June, we're moving from Moodle 2.5 to Moodle 2.6. There's much more uncertainty there, so that's particularly important to people like testing. So I'm trying to move to the next slide. Right, so that's what I wanted to say about hosting. Now, what's this doing? Can you all see a slide saying server monitoring? Good. Okay, so it's important. I mean, you set all this stuff up, and students are using it, and it's all just these boxes in a server room that you can't access, and you need to know it's working. So we have various ways of monitoring what's going on. This is one system called TTM. I don't know what it stands for, but I'm guessing at least one of the T's is transaction and the M is monitoring. But this is showing for each of our web servers, the top is the number of requests being served. Ooh, don't tell the scientists, but there's no units here. The bottom one is the page load times on that server, and I think the units there are tenths of a second. So you can see that at a busy time of day, most of the requests are taking about 0.4 seconds, which is really pretty good if you compare what other people say their page load times are. Of course, this is just the page load time for the HTML. There's then, from the user's point of view, you also need to load things like the JavaScript and CSS. You'll see some big spikes here. Actually, you can see the sort of pink color that about every quarter of an hour there's a big spike. That's our cron server. So you can see overnight when there's not much going on, cron runs every 15 minutes. In the middle of the day when things get a bit busy, it struggles to keep up and only runs about every 3/4 of an hour. And you can also see in normal use every so often there's a slower request. But you can also see our typical daily pattern where it kind of ramps up at about 7 or 8 in the morning, pods along during the working day. Sometimes there's a bit of a blip at lunchtime. It's not always clear. Then there's a bit of a dip as people commute home from work, but then sort of in the evening is the peak study time, and it only really ramps down around midnight. So when we're thinking about time to do an update, well, we only use kindness. It doesn't make us come in the middle of the night, but we'll normally aim to do it between about 7 and 8 a.m. So that doesn't inconvenience too many students. It's before our peak study time. But you can see even in kind of the middle of the night, we have people studying. As well as this TTM system, we also use something called Nagios, which if you know about servers, you've probably heard of. that will measure, this is measuring what the system is doing, kind of requests and how long they take. Nagios will monitor things like how much memory is being used and how much CPU is being used and so on. So multiple levels of monitoring, and actually on the slide listing all the teams involved, I forgot to mention the server operations folk who actually monitor those things and notice when it goes wrong and restart the servers or whatever they need to do. So that's the sort of hardware level. Let's now move on to thinking about the Moodle code. Internally, we release 4 times a year, so March, June, September, and December. So at the moment, we're towards the end of working towards the June release. We started working on the code for the new features for the June release back in January. One of the first things we did was merge in the latest version of the Moodle core code. Because this was a major upgrade from Moodle 2.5.4 or 5 to Moodle 2.6, there are API changes, and we have about 211 Moodle add-ons, which is a bit crazy. We've been very, very good with Moodle 2. We haven't customized the core code, but we have written a lot of add-ons. Quite a lot of them are very small, just a block to display one thing, but others are quite big, like Forum NG is a whole application in its own right. So anyway, having done a major Moodle upgrade, we need to test all of our add-ons. We make a big Google Docs spreadsheet that lists all the add-ons and assign people in the team to check them out, and we run through our test scripts. And in fact, that was about a week. In a week, we'd tested most of our add-ons, and we're happy they still worked. A bit later, Moodle 2.6.2 came out, so we merged those changes in, but that's a much smaller thing. And we worked away developing new features up to the end of April. And then we have about 5 weeks of testing until the 3rd of June, when I will be getting into work quite early to do the upgrade with the server folks. And there's an overlap here. Once we finish developing new features for the June release, and that's our testers start testing it, then most of the rest of the team moves on to thinking about what are the new features going to be in the next release in September. And of course, even before that, the sort of requirements folk in LTS have been thinking about what we should be doing next. So it's a kind of rolling thing. Nadav makes the point that rather than getting up early in the morning, we could alternatively stay late at night. But the problem is if you do a system update at 2 in the morning and then go home and go to sleep, if something goes wrong and you aren't on hand to do anything about it, we actually prefer to do the upgrade early in the morning, even though there's slightly more people wanting to use the system, because then once you finish the upgrade, everyone else arrives in work, and if anything goes wrong, you've got the whole team available to solve any problems. Yeah, that's another good point. Yeah, Teresa. In fact, Moodle 2. Oh, I see, Nadav, yes. In Moodle 2, there are many more ways to avoid hacking the core code. It turns out you can do an awful lot of evil in renderers in your theme if nothing else works, and there are many more types of add-ons to make it possible to extend Moodle. So it's getting easier in Moodle 2 to manage things. Anyway, so that was our release schedule. Obviously, we manage code in our own Git repository. We have a branch OUVLE that branches off from one of the Moodle stable releases. Like with Moodle core development, every new feature gets developed on a separate branch until it's finished, and then it gets reviewed, and then it gets and tested, and then only after we're happy does it get merged into the main branch to be included in the next release. And for each release on our servers, we have a stable branch in case we need to deploy bug fixes. and typically we normally deploy at least one bug fix each week, because people are finding stuff. In fact, it's a good week when we don't, and we've got good systems for that. And obviously, the week or two after a release, there'll be more bug fixes than that. And when it comes to just doing a minor upgrade, so as I say, at the start of the June release, we were based on Moodle 2.6.1. When we moved to Moodle 2.6.2, that's just a simple git merge. When it comes to doing a major release, say jumping from Moodle 2.5 to 2.6, then that is more complicated because of how Moodle branches work. And there is a clever trick you can do to do the merge with your merge conflicts. I'm not going to try and explain this now, but again, I read a blog post about this when I did the merge to Moodle 2.6.1. And the link to that blog post is on the course, the iMoot course for this presentation. To deploy the updates, we use Puppet. So for those of you who don't know, what Puppet does is basically, as you saw, we have 8 web servers, and you need a copy of the Moodle code on each web server. So what Puppet does is you tell it what the configuration of your servers should be, and it will automatically update all 8 servers at the same time to that configuration. And it's not just the code, which is easy, they're files on disk, it does the code. It will also deploy operating system updates. So again, I mean, it's many, lots of people managing lots of servers use Puppet. It's a good tool, it's open source. Testing, we have 2 human testers, David and Sanjana, and they're mainly doing 2 sorts of testing. When we develop a new feature, they will test that new feature and verify that it works as it's supposed to according to the specification, and they're also very good at thinking of things that weren't in the specification that you didn't think of and that you should have done. So they're testing new features, and then in the weeks running up to a major release, they're doing regression testing on the whole system to make sure we haven't broken anything we hadn't thought of that, from the functionality we thought we hadn't changed. We do make use of PHP unit for unit tests, not quite as consistently as we would like, but we're trying to get better in that area. So PHP unit is really for testing the code behind the scenes. More recently, Moodle HQ have been adopting a tool called Behat, which tests the Moodle front end. It's pretty cool. You set it off running, and a Firefox window pops up, and much faster than you could, it sort of, it goes in, logs in, username, password, submit, go to a course, go to a quiz, go to the edit page, add a question. So it will automate, it will simulate a user interacting with Moodle and test that it works, follow through a script, test that it works the way it's supposed to. Problem that is much slower if you have to wait to do everything through the Moodle user interface. So I think when Moodle HQ run it, it takes about 3 or 4 hours to run through all the test scripts, which is a bit of a pain, whereas PHP unit will test all of Moodle in about 10 minutes. But I'm afraid we haven't really started using Behat yet. Actually, that's not true. Since I made this slide, about 4 of us in the team have installed Behat and started using it, but we should certainly be using it more. It's a really good way to automatically test Moodle, and we could automate a lot of the regression testing, I think, which would then free up David and Sanjana to do sort of higher level testing that only a human can do, because they wouldn't have to do some of the routine stuff. That's testing. So the final section of this talk, I wanted to talk about some of the sort of configuration options we set. Was it Nadav earlier who asked about caching configuration? That's a key one for getting good performance. Certainly for sessions, the default now for Moodle is to use the database for sessions, which is a good, simple option. It's fairly fast, and every Moodle site already has a database, so it's going to work. But if you have a really big and high traffic site, you need something faster. And at the moment, we're using Memcache. And the other trick, which is actually now obsolete, in the past, Moodle used to cache filtered text in the database, and that was too slow. But and so a common recommendation was to turn off this filtered text caching setting. In Moodle, is it 2.6 or 2.7? That setting has been removed anyway, so you no longer need that advice. I think we're using Memcache because we're using it doesn't make a very big difference as far as we can see. What we're actually thinking of doing, there's another caching technology called Redis, and we've heard good things about that. We believe Moodle Rooms is using Redis, and when I was giving this presentation in Leipzig, someone in the audience said, "Are you using Redis?" And the answer is no, but we've heard of it, and it's on our list of things to investigate. At the moment, our servers are running Red Hat Enterprise Linux 5, and we decided to miss out version 6 of that platform and wait for version 7 to come out and then move there in one step because it was less work. And then the release of Red Hat Enterprise Linux 7 got delayed, so I think they finally released it. So we're going to move then, and at the time we do that move, we're going to review a lot of things and decide if we can be doing it better. I don't know if there's yet certainly Redis cache plugin is not yet in Moodle. As I say, we know some people have made an add-on to do it. I'm not sure if they're shared or not. But I know that Sam Hemmelrich at Moodle HQ who's done a lot of the work on the caching system, was about to start looking at it with a view to getting it as an option in Moodle Core, so that's good. Now, it makes a big difference how you configure your caches, and it's really very complicated, and I couldn't reduce it to bullet points, so here's just a screen grab on the configuration screen. We're using Memcache for almost anything, and actually it turns out we are using 3 different Memcache stores. It's just basically the cache configuration. It makes me think of this. There are all these knobs you can twiddle that have an effect on what happens, and no one really understands how it works. What you do is you're doing your load testing and you twiddle the knobs until it sort of seems okay, and then you stop fiddling with it. It would be good to have some more documentation and advice about how you should set up your caching. Actually, that's slightly unfair. There's some rules of thumb you can apply. Let me try and explain. Nadav mentioned earlier this question: do you have your Memcache on a separate server, or do you store it on the web servers? And the answer is, for a lot of things, you store it on the web servers because then the data is on the same computer and it's really, really fast. There's no network latency. Excuse me. That works for most things, but not everything, because some things like the login sessions really have to be shared. So that's this Memcache shared store, is the ones where Memcache is on a different server, and we use that for sessions, and we use it for one other thing that I can't remember now. But then, so that works for I think, I can't remember. But then for other things that you need to access all the time, you want them stored on the same servers so it's really fast, because the shared store is the other end of a network connection. And someone in America, was it Eric Merrill, came up with this clustered store. What the clustered store does is it stores a copy of the data on each server, excuse me, and when you save the data, it saves it onto all 6 servers, so saving is a bit slower, but then when it wants to read the data, it loads it from the local machine, which is fast. So that was great because the data in the caches has to be shared across all the servers. So we wanted to use that for pretty much everything, but when we were doing our load testing, we found that for a few things like the language strings, it makes no sense, but the clustered store was slower. So actually for language strings, we use another store which really does just store on the local computer and doesn't share it, which is sort of bad if you read the documentation about caching. The cache data must be the same on all servers, but for certain things like the Moodle language strings, they only change when you upgrade Moodle, and when you upgrade Moodle, it clears all the caches anyway, so you can get away with storing them on the local machine. So there were a few things that we found in load testing had to be on the local machine. Yeah, the database schema was another one that's in here. There's no logical reason why this should be faster, because it never gets written to, and the cluster store is only slower when you write, but in our load testing, it was slower. We didn't understand it, but I'd say once it's working well enough, you stop fiddling with the knobs. The other thing, as everybody knows, a big problem for big sites is the Moodle log table. It gets very, very big. It's very useful if you want to do learning analytics, but it is very big. We have a clever trick which, using a bit of Postgres, what we actually do is we split the log table into a lot of smaller tables behind the scenes, because you're only ever writing to the most recent lot of data. So you have a small table with recent data, and then the old data is stored in other tables, and so Moodle log is a view that joins it all together. And then we have some rules on the view, so when it tries to write data to the log, it actually writes it to one of the underlying tables. There's a Moodle forum post that explains that in more detail. As I say, it relies on Postgres-specific trickery, but it does mean we could solve this problem without changing the Moodle code. Actually, that's a lie. There's one line of Moodle code in the database system that you have to change to make it consider a view the same as a table. Anyway, that was quite neat. But again, in Moodle 2.7, they've done some improvements to the logging system that should help us solve this problem. But they put some of the necessary stuff in place. We still need to kind of work out, there's still more work to do to actually make use of that. We won't move to Moodle 2.7 until December. So those were just the sort of key points about the configuration I wanted to point out for performance. So that was everything I had in mind to say. I told you a bit about the OU, and then we worked up from sort of hardware to code to configuration. And now let's have some questions or comments. Users, the question is what devices are users using? They're using all sorts of things. I mean, they're all studying from home. So that will be a mixture of desktop machines and laptops. And then recently, of course, more and more people have been getting tablets and iPhones and Android phones. So I've seen those figures, and I've seen a pretty graph, but I didn't think to include it in the presentation. I can't remember the numbers. It may be about something like 10 or 15% of requests coming from phones now. I think it's worth digging into those. I mean, the graphs I've seen are just the total numbers of requests. I think it's interesting to dig into those numbers a bit more, because I'm sure you would find that students do certain sorts of activities on their phone and they'll do different things on their laptop. But I'm not sure if anyone's really done that analysis and come up with some nice, clear answers. It would be interesting to look at. Of course, an effect of that is in the past we were using Java for things like audio recording and Flash, and with phones and tablets, that's no longer an option. So we've been migrating away from places where we were using Java and Flash. We do enable web services, and it goes both ways. There are parts of our code that make web service requests to other OU systems to pull in data, and we provide various Moodle web services that other OU systems connect to extract data from Moodle. So yes, we have the Moodle web services stuff turned on. A lot of the rest of the OU IT department is working on Microsoft things like .NET, so we're mostly using SOAP web services because that's how .NET developers tend to think. For learning analytics, we use SAS, which is a big kind of data warehousing thing for doing big analysis. So we ship certain bits of data out of the Moodle database and into the SAS database on a regular basis, and then all the processing is done there. And there's lots of work in that area that I don't know about in very much detail. I did read the first paper that the learning analytics folk read, and I was a little bit unimpressed because basically they worked out that if a student never does anything on the VLE, then they're probably going to drop out. That's a bit unfair, but that was basically the one-line summary of their paper. If a student doesn't ever look at the VLE, they're probably going to drop out. So all this statistics to say something that's probably common sense. But that's just the start of a research project. And the data did confirm that.
Hi, Tim. I'm just going to jump in here. And thank you so much. That was, as a lot of people have said, so much information, but it's amazing to see how the Open University works and pretty complex it all is, but how it all works brilliantly together. If anybody has any more questions, you can definitely stay in here and have a chat with Tim, or pop it in the forum, or you can contact Tim through the iMoot website. And yeah, just thank you so much, Tim, and it's been fantastic. And if you want to hear Tim again, don't forget to look through the schedule and see what's coming up next. Thanks very much, Tim.
My pleasure.